This is TW Sports Talk here on YouTube, based out of Philadelphia area. Um, we're talking about Donovan McNabb today. Um, Now I know it's not a obviously I say that name and it's not you know uh, no implication on the future really but as recently Donovan McNabb made it official that he is going to retire as a Philadelphia Eagle. And that his retirement ceremony is going to take place in the Week 3 matchup at Lincoln Financial Field when the Eagles take on Andy Reid's new team, the Kansas City Chiefs. Um, it's funny how they do that, with the whole Andy Reid and Donovan McNabb thing wrapped into one. But there's been a lot of people, a lot of talk, in the past week or so as to whether or not McNabb's number should be retired, and is he a Hall of Famer? Um, is it too soon for them to have this ceremony? Is the timing right for it? I'm going to cover that all in this edition of TW Sports Talk. Um, First of all, is the timing of this proper? Um, I don't think it quite is. I think it's a little. I think it's a few years early. I think many people still have many fans still have a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to Donovan McNabb. Um, the whole him and Andy Reid were big for the better part of the last decade and a half. They were Andy Reid coaching here for 14 years. Donovan McNabb was our quarterback for um, 10, 11 seasons. So, you know, and the whole downfall of that era, um, the whole thing with McNabb and whatnot. I don't think the Eagle fans, like myself, are quite ready to embrace Donovan McNabb in this way. I think you give it a few years and people will be willing to sit back and look at, oh yeah, Donovan McNabb, he was a pretty good quarterback. We should honor him in a ceremony. But right now, or just a few months from now, I should say, when they take on the Chiefs, I think that's a little too soon. And I think there's, still that little bit of a bad taste in our mouths with when it comes to Donovan McNabb. Um, I went to the Redskins and the Vikings, and he couldn't find any success there. He was pretty much done when he was going from the Eagles, and now that nobody has really expressed interest in signing him this offseason, he decided to retire. So, but again, I think it's a little too soon. That's I think it's too soon for the Eagles fan base in general to truly embrace him properly. I mean, at this ceremony, there could there could be a chance that he gets quite a bit of booze still. Um, and I would think at a retirement ceremony when you didn't see Dawkins was quite embraced at his ceremony. And I think it was good timing, obviously, but I think people a little more easy, they look back at Brian Dawkins, a little better than they would with Don McNabb. And with time, I think we would look at Don McNabb better. We look back on his whole run better than we would right now. Coming off of a 4-12 season, the end of the Andy Reid era, etc. So, I think this year having that ceremony, I think, could be a little embarrassing. You can have some booze and with Don McNabb, and
I'm embarrassed.
I mean, he could be a little embarrassed, I think, out of this. So I don't quite think it's time for it. I think you give it a few years, and we could truly embrace him as a fan base in a situation scenario where we retire him. And I mean, whether or not we retire his number 5, I mean, that's to me that's probably preference. I mean, now not number five isn't a very popular number to begin with, so perhaps it wouldn't perhaps it wouldn't even matter if he retired his number. I mean, I don't it doesn't seem like many quarterbacks wear five to begin with, and I mean, we'll give him, he was the greatest quarterback in Eagles franchise history. I mean, that we can clear out right, right here and now. Um, so I mean, perhaps he could retire his number. Um, to some, that comes down to preference, and when a lot of people around, think number five, they think of Donovan McNabb. So, and again, I don't see anybody else really wearing that number, you know, too often here around here, anyways. So, you know, I don't mind if they go ahead and retire the number. That's probably just preference. Um, but the big question is Donovan McNabb a Hall of Famer? Um, I think he is borderline Hall of Famer. I think he is slightly under being a Hall of Famer. That's just my opinion. Um, when I mean, people look at his statistics. They look at him. He's got about 35,000 yards, I believe, and but when you compare that to a guy like Peyton Manning, who's had more longevity, and of course, all of the prior, the 2011 season, he didn't even play due to his recovering, his neck issues, and but still, he comes back and he has a great year, and still, and leads the Broncos to a 13-3 season on a new team. So, Peyton Manning has had longevity. Brady has had longevity. Favre, longevity. McNabb, on the other hand, he hasn't. Once he was off the Eagles, he couldn't produce, and he just, I think ever since the Super Bowl loss to the Patriots, I think he just kind of declined to me. Um, Furthermore, McNabb just seemed to be unable to perform when he needed to be at his best. Um, you look back at obviously you look back at those NFC Championship games that they lost. You look back at the one against the Arizona Cardinals, and several years ago. Um, Again, you look at the Super Bowl, the multiple interceptions, and bad throws he made. It was unfortunate. Um, it seemed like when we needed McNabb to perform at his best, in the most important and crucial situations, it just seemed that he couldn't. For whatever reason, he just wasn't very clutch, and I think that's a big, you know, a big factor that, to me, perhaps does not make him a Hall of Famer. Um, people can say what they want. They can say, oh well, he still helped you. He still helped the Eagles, win many games, and that's true. The Eagles also had a great defense, and they were also part of what was, an inferior conference in the NFC for much of his tenure in the Eagles. So, you know, I mean, yeah, he did bring a lot of winning, but he didn't bring what the Eagles fans have been after for so many years, what the franchise has been after for so many years, and that is a championship, and not just one championship, a dynasty, multiple championships. So, people can say what they want, all the playoff runs, um, but again, 1-4 in NFC championship games. Um, Three of those losses were to teams when they were, I believe, when they were favored. Against the Arizona Cardinals, against the Panthers, the Buccaneers. Um, they were you lose three NFC championship games like that when you are favored to win, to win them, and a lot of it can be kind of pointed on McNabb. It's just it's one of those things that leaves a bad taste in many Eagles fans' minds, or mouths, I should say. So I mean, is he a Hall of Famer to you? I mean, I don't quite think he is. Again, I give him, you got to give him credit. Greatest Eagles quarterback in franchise history. But just slightly below a Hall of Famer, I'd say. Now, had they won the Super Bowl, had he led him to win that Super Bowl, maybe he would be a Hall of Famer. Um, those other NFC championship games, turn them into wins. Maybe a Super Bowl, it could be a different conversation. But I sit here in, May 24th, 2013, and I look back and I just think, as McNabb's career is essentially over, and I just think, no, I just don't. I look back and I don't quite think he did enough to get into the Hall of Fame. Again, he put up some great numbers. He had some great years. Greatest quarterback in Eagles franchise history. But he didn't perform at his best and at the level that we needed him to when when the time was at its most, important, when we were at the most important times for him to perform well. So, I just, as far as Don McNabb getting in the Hall of Fame, I just, I got to give him an Andy Reid negative on that one. So, but nevertheless, we'll see this early retirement ceremony. Um, yeah, again, that's probably a few years premature. Um, and I guess the discussion will continue. But it's definitely a notable discussion because McNabb is on the fence as far as I'm concerned when it comes to being, in the Hall of Fame. And if he does get in the Hall of Fame, I would think that they're being rather generous, but it is what it is, and only time will tell if he makes it in the Hall of Fame. But I just don't quite think that McNabb did enough to make it in the Hall of Fame. And big seasons and big numbers goes to show that it's not always all about that if you can't put together the the ultimate the ultimate accomplishment of, say, winning the Super Bowl. And a guy like Dan Marino, he didn't win a Super Bowl, but his numbers were astounding. They were, yeah, his career was he still put up incredible numbers. Numbers high enough to get him into the Hall of Fame. McNabb, I don't quite think that he did that. Um, and again, his longevity may have hurt this a little bit too. May hurt the consideration as well. So, with that in mind, that will wrap things up here in this edition of TW Sports Talk. Thanks for tuning in. I encourage you to send in any questions, any comments, um, anything you'd like me to talk about here on TW Sports Talk, and we will certainly take it under consideration talking about it. Thanks for listening as always, and just continue to tune in here to this YouTube channel and TW Sports Talk.